Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another review. As you can tell from up there, it is time for another Friday the 13th review. And it's now time for the fourth entry in the series, Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter. Final chapter. Right. But at the time, they were going to actually say this was the final chapter, just like they were going to do a part 3, but they didn't advertise it as such. But the ending does kind of make it feel like that was going to be the last one. But this is how slasher series usually are. Just a ploy. I'm just surprised they don't take the final chapter off of it in retroactive releases. But I mean, retroactive. I don't know if that'd be the right word, but I think you get my meaning. In subsequent releases, there is. Now the film is directed by Joseph Zito, who is also known for the films Missing in Action, Invasion USA, and Red Scorpion. 3 films that I need to watch, and this is, I believe, if I'm looking at this, I think this might be his second horror film, but I'm not entirely sure because apparently before this he directed a film called The Prowler, which that film, like this one, had brutal gore effects and dark atmosphere, so I'm guessing it was probably horror, probably just different. Maybe one of these days I'll give that a watch. Anyway, the makeup effects are once again done by Tom Savini, which at the time it was, I created this character, might as well come back to kill it. And the thing I like is that one of the characters, Tommy Jarvis, who eventually becomes one of the few recurring characters in this series, other than of course Jason and Mrs. Voorhees, I like that with that character they give it a nice little tribute to Tom Savini. The character is good at making masks and other effects. It's a nice little tribute to him. Anyway, the film stars Kimberly Beck, Peter Barton, Corey Feldman, Crispin Glover. Let's see. Jason is played by Ted White, and other actors and actresses of note are Camilla Moore and Carrie Moore, Lisa Freeman, Bonnie Hellman, and that's about it. The 2 big ones of note are Corey Feldman and Crispin Glover, because you all know Corey Feldman went on to other films, Goonies, Lost Boys, all 3 films. I think Dream a Little Dream, among other stuff, and of course the voice of Donatello in 2 of the 3 live-action Ninja Turtles movies. Which one of these turtles is voiced by Corey Feldman? Robot Chicken. And of course, Crispin Glover, McFly! McFly! Marty McFly's dad, among other stuff. Anyway, the film has a... has a 5.9 on IMDb, a 50 with the audience on Rotten Tomatoes, and a 26% with the critics, which is a shame, because it just seems that more so in the horror slasher heyday, adjusting the camera a little bit, of the 80s, slasher films always used to get slammed. Of course, you got the occasional one that would get some praise, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Granted, that was the 70s. And then, of course, Halloween, which is also the late 70s, but that was rare. Most of the time they would get slammed, and maybe some praise, like Part 6 did get praised for its use of humor. If I remember right, I think a few critics praised Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 for its dark comedy, but not that many. Most of them they get, slapped upside the head because, the characters are, not written very deeply. They're written like side characters in a Shakespeare play. Not a lot to them. And they get killed off in vile ways, and the whole "it's the pornography of violence" stuff, which I just roll my eyes at. A film like this is made for one of the 2 reasons you make film. 2 reasons you make film: entertainment and art. A slasher film, it can be art, like Halloween is probably the best example. Psycho with Texas Chainsaw Massacre would also be good examples. But for the most part, you make it for entertainment. Now, with these Friday the 13th films, they're mostly for entertainment, and partially riding Halloween's coattails, which I talked about when I reviewed the first film. With this one, I have to say, because I watched these in preparation for one of the first Friday the 13th this year, I watched the first 4 in a row, mainly to have the first 3 fresh in my mind when I reviewed this one. And I have to say, that of the first four, this is definitely my favorite one. I mean, I really respect the first one, and I do enjoy it to a point. I do enjoy it in the second one. I like the second one a little bit more. Third one, I like parts of it. I like that it has a bigger budget, but I still like two a little bit better than that one, mainly because the very ending part I thought worked better in two than it did in three. But this one is definitely my favorite, and part of the reason is you have a couple of characters that are likable. And the funny thing is, they're played by the two actors that went on to big things, Feldman and Glover. In Crispin Glover's character, you can understand him because what he's talking about, his ex-girlfriend just stopped talking to him randomly, and he's talking with his buddy that he treated her right, and then of course him giving the usual stuff. Let's bring up the computer. It says you're a dead fuck. A what? A dead fuck, a lousy lay. Oh, just tell it to me straight. The computer don't lie. Well, there's no computer. Well, there's no lie. And you can tell he's a little awkward with girls, which me personally, I can relate with that. So when he's trying to talk to one of the girls at the party, you can understand him, and you actually want to see this guy live, which, a little spoiler for those of you who haven't seen the film, obviously he's one of the characters that dies. He actually has one of my favorite deaths. The corkscrew! But you hope he lives, but then that happens. And then the other one, of course, is Feldman's character, Tommy Jarvis, and that's mainly because he's a kid. And if I remember right, this is the first time we actually see an actual kid in danger in this series, because part 1 and 2, it's basically all teenagers and adults. Part 3, also teenagers and a couple adults. So this is the first time a kid's in danger. And of course, I don't know about everyone, but some people first saw or heard about these films as a kid, so you can identify with that. I know with me. Granted, I didn't watch this series in order as a kid, but I can tell you, when I first saw this film, that probably was more of a subconscious thing, but I identified with Tommy, possibly because I also liked the magic of filmmaking. Granted, I couldn't do stuff like what he does in the film, but I could identify with that. So by the end, when he's the one that has to take out Jason in that manner, even though it's kind of weird how Jason even falls for that, you want to see him do it. And when he does actually finally succeed in doing what he does, you're like, yeah, get him, Tommy, get him. Of course, he snaps a little bit too much in the end, but with what's going on, you can understand, the whole fight or flight, kill or be killed part of our brain. Anyway, the movie was filmed for about $2.5 million, according to Wikipedia. I'm going to double check IMDb real quick. IMDb says about 1.8 million, so I'm going to guess it's anywhere in between that. So a small budget even for the 80s, but it makes good use of it, partially due to Savini being a master of the makeup effects art. And both sources are the same on what it made. It made about 32 million, which is a good score for that budget, which that explains why they made another film they released the next year. And it was released on April 13th. So 2 days before tax day, let's send Jason in. Kind of funny. Jason's here to collect your taxes. That would actually be a funny meme if done right. But anyway, the music by Harry Manfredini sets the proper tone for this film. I think Zito used the camera just right. It's been a while, but when I first got my special edition DVD, I listened to the commentary. It was interesting, mostly to hear him talk about it again. Maybe next time I watch the film, I'll listen to it again. But it doesn't really make me want to listen to more directors' commentaries of the films I got, because I don't think I've listened to that many of the commentaries I've got. Which is kind of funny considering I like to do fan commentaries of the films, but I gotta listen to more actual commentaries. Now, the acting-wise in this movie is what you would expect in a slasher movie, especially since not all the characters have a lot of substance. I wouldn't say that they're to the point of stock, maybe a couple of them, but there's not really a lot of them. They're basically written so you like them a little bit, and then they're fodder. But the actors, I think, do a good job. Like the actress that plays Mrs. Jarvis, for what she has to do, she does a good job. Though it's kind of sad that there never is 100% full closure for her character in the movie, because it just she looks, and then it just jump cuts, and she's never talked about in the rest of the movie. Though in the alternate deleted ending, we do find out she was killed. But it's still kind of sad that there's no closure for her, even because a couple times in this series, when someone dies off screen, their body is usually found. Like the next film after this. A couple characters are killed off screen, but their bodies are still shown. You would think with Mrs. Jarvis, like maybe she could have been the body thrown through the window at one point. A lot of the death scenes are good, but The sad thing is the MPAA made them edit some of the stuff, which it doesn't kill them, but it makes you wonder how the impact would have been if they showed everything. But this is, I guess, the halfway point between showing it and the power of suggestion, where you see a little bit, and then the sound effects and the editing, makes you imagine the rest of it. It's like, yeah. I think one of those is kind of shown better in the next film with the belt death, but I'll talk about that when I get to that film. Ted White, of the early Jasons, he is definitely my favorite. No disrespect to the actors who play Jason in 2 and 3, but just Ted White is my favorite of the early ones. Though it's hard to say who my favorite one is. I know everyone loves Kane Hodder. I like him too, but I don't know if I'd say he's my favorite one. Maybe C.J. Graham, but I'd have to watch once I get all through all these films again. Probably I'll have a definitive one, but I respect each and every one of them. It's just of the first four where Jason is semi-human, I have to go with Ted White. And of course, like I've said before, Jason runs. You see it a couple times in this film. He also bleeds. As Arnold say, if it bleeds, we can kill it. Which this movie really to show. Jason bleeds, therefore you can kill him. The film is 91 minutes and runs at a pretty good pace for that. Plenty of kills. And of course, it has the wrap up. It has the whole introduction thing at the beginning. If you haven't seen the first three, a quick run through, which for me, the first time I watched this film, I hadn't watched 2 and 3 yet, at least back to back. I think I'd seen 2. I don't think I'd seen 3 yet. I don't think I saw 3 until I got my DVDs. So it was a nice little recap. Now, of course, I haven't talked about the plot yet. Well, the plot of the film is it takes place not that long after the ending of Part 3. Jason, has been axed in the head. He's taken to the morgue. He escapes, kills 2 attendants, and gets out. The next day, a group of teenagers are going to a cabin out in the woods to party. Never states how close it is to Crystal Lake, but I'm guessing it's in the same vicinity. Now, one thing, it makes you wonder, why would you still go on vacation after you heard something about a psycho killer? But I guess they're, like everyone else, like the Jarvis family, they assume he's probably been dealt with, and that if his body disappeared, it probably was just stolen. But bad idea to probably think that after what happened the previous time Jason was thought to be killed. And then again, in Part 2, he really wasn't dealt a blow that would be considered full-on lethal. Some lethality to it, but I'd say the wound they did to him in Part 3, that one would be more lethal. An axe straight to the head. And of course, the cabin they rent is right across the street from the Jarvis cabin. And one by one, Jason starts to pick them all off, and then he's eventually defeated. That's all I'm going to say about it. If there's any death in here that is kind of a little funny, it's the death of the one character who you think is going to be the one that's going to fight Jason, but then he dies. Rob, that's the character, who he's apparently the brother of the character Sandra from Part 2, which takes place a couple days afterwards. You wonder, why is he here and not at a funeral? But I guess, they're preparing the body and all that, so he's like, I'm going to go find Jason. I'm going to take care of Jason. You're messing with the wrong man's sister. And then, of course, his death is I don't laugh at it, but it does have a little bit of moments where you probably could get a chuckle out of it, because Jason's killing him. He's like, he's killing me! It's like, you thought you could take Jason on? Hey, even if you don't like the film, at least the black guy in Part 8 puts up a better fight, and that's against zombie Jason. Think about it. This guy, you think he's going to be a badass? Human Jason kills him easily. The black guy punches zombie Jason a bunch of times and then gets his own head knocked off. Imagine if that black guy was fighting human Jason. He probably would have put up a better fight, and he might have actually been able to kill Jason. Well, granted, you don't want to punch a hockey mask. That's probably going to injure your hands. Anyway, time for the trivia part. Okay, I've already talked about that part. This is an interesting thing. At the time, this installment of the series contained the most nudity, which I can attest to, having watched, all 3 films in a row. It does have the most nudity. I'm guessing that's part of the reason the MPA came down on them on the gore. You gotta have that nudity. You only can keep it if you edit the gore scenes. Ah! During filming, Kimberly Beck, who plays Trish, experienced strange occurrences, including a man watching her while she ran in the park and strange phone calls at all hours. They stopped when production was over. Makes me wonder if those were done by studio executives to get her in the proper mood for filming. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Barbara Howard used a body double for her shower love scene, which you can kind of tell, but it's like, could they find a better double? Director Joseph Zito was opposed to using clips from previous installments at the beginning of the film. I'm guessing that was his objections were vetoed by the studio. The strange dance which Jimbo performs at the party was contributed by actor Crispin Glover and was based on the eccentric way he actually danced at clubs. It's an interesting dance. Maybe one of these days if I'm at a dance thing I'll try to pop some of them out because it's an interesting dance. On the set, he was dancing to Back in Black by AC/DC as the scene was filmed, but in the actual film, an edited version of Love is a Lie by Lion was dubbed into the scene. Makes me wonder why. Probably was too expensive to get the rights to Back in Black, but that would have been cool. Hear that? You're like, then all of a sudden, it's like you were watching the movie, like, wonder what's gonna happen. All of a sudden, you hear Back in Black, Back in Black, and in the sack. It's been too long. I'm glad to be back. Yeah, that would have been cool. According to Corey Feldman, the screams he made when Jason grabbed him through the window were genuine, as he was truly terrified. I wouldn't be surprised, because from what I've heard, Ted White did not like Corey Feldman, and because he thought he was too much of a brat, and he used that hatred as his motivation to get him. And you could tell that a little bit in some of his performances, like, do I want to get him or do I want to get her? Brat, bitch, all that. The video which Axel watches is called, I'm going to probably have trouble with this word, Aerobicize, and stars Darcy DeMoss, who went on to play Nikki in Jason Lives. Camilla Moore actually read for the role of Samantha, but when the producers discovered she had a twin, they offered both sisters the role of Tina and Terry. This is the only film in the series to shoot new footage using sets and locations from a previous film. That would be the opening scene where they take Jason's body out of the barn. And this is a funny one. In an attempt at method acting, Lawrence Monoson decided that since his character Ted is smoking pot when he dies, he should try smoking pot for real in order to film the scene. However, he soon found that in his intoxicated state, it was too difficult to fully concentrate on filming. However, I have a feeling that even if they didn't, nothing of what he filmed while high was usable, it probably, was good research for how to act high. He's like, okay, that's how I felt while I was high. Then as he's acting the scenes, draws on the experience a little bit. Because if you watch him in those scenes, you'd be convinced he's high. Or at least slightly tipsy on drugs, if not full on high. Let's see. Body count 13. After Jason actor Ted White finished his scenes for this film, he immediately started working on Starman. While on set for the night's filming, a group of reporters were waiting to interview Jeff Bridges, but were unable to because he was unavailable. Therefore, director John Carpenter told the reporters to talk to White about a film he had recently finished. After telling the reporters he had just finished playing Jason in the latest Friday the 13th film, the next day's article was entirely about him, and that night, numerous Friday fans arrived on set solely to see White. That's an interesting story. Starman, that's another film I gotta watch one of these days. The moment where Jason's hand moves in the morgue was done by Ted White after Zito had called cut on the scene. However, the camera was still rolling and caught this movement, and it was included in the film. Nice little accident there. Kimberly Beck stated in the Crystal Lake Memories book that she does not like the horror genre. In addition to this, she also said that she feels this movie was not even a B movie, but rather a C movie. I will have to respectfully disagree with her on that. I say part of that is the fact she doesn't like horror, so obviously she's going to have a bias against the film for that. And apparently I heard Zito was hard to work with, so that probably will also do it. This is not a C movie. A C movie would be... Let me think of a good example of what I would classify as a C movie. Like very, very low budget movies, like the Sci-Fi Channel movies would be C movies. I guess one, at least compared to this. Porn movies would be considered C movies. The female hitchhiker was called Fat Girl in the original draft of the script. The house used for the Jarvis's home was later used as the Anderson home in the film Ed Gein, where serial killer Ed Gein is apprehended. Okay, I already talked about that one. The Jarvis family sandwich hug was based on a group hug that screenwriter Barney Cohen's family did. The Jarvis's family dog Gordon was named after a recently deceased dog, which a friend of director Joseph Zito's owned. Too bad what happens to the dog. The nurse's tag reads R. Morgan, RN, a homage to actress Robbie Morgan, who plays Annie in Friday the 13th. Joseph Zito wanted Jason's hockey mask to explode apart in the opening credits, but there was not enough time in post-production to pull off this gag. Bonnie Hellman's agent told her about a possible role in this film, The Hitchhiker, but then told her that she would not want to do it as there was no lines. However, she ended up taking the role anyway. Wonder how much she got paid for it. Rob was originally supposed to have high-tech equipment which he would use to track Jason, but the props for this looked cheap and the idea was scrapped. Plus, it would be a little weird, and it would also draw questions to his character even more, like, a couple days, where'd you get this equipment? I mean, it would make sense if Quint had stuff like that to track a shark, because he hunted sharks, but what are you going to say, you're a Jason hunter? The only character in this series it would make sense to have high-tech equipment like that would be Creighton Duke, and that's because he's supposedly been hunting Jason for years. The film was shot entirely in California. Peter Barton was talked into taking a role in this film by the powers of Matthew Starr co-star Amy Steele, who played Ginny in Part 2. Due to the production's low budget, several actors had to perform uncomfortable or dangerous stunts themselves, including Judy Arnson, who was required to remain submerged in a lake in near freezing temperatures, and Peter Barton, who was actually slammed into the shower wall when Jason attacked him. Ted White, who portrayed Jason, advocated for several of the actors, requesting that Barton be allowed to use a crash pad and threatened to quit when Joseph Zito refused to allow Arnson to get out of the lake between takes. White and Zito developed a combative relationship on set, which resulted in White demanding to have his name removed from the credits, calling the film a piece of shit. I'm guessing, I wonder how he feels about that now, because I don't really hear anything about him trashing the film in recent years. Maybe because it's loved by fans, he changed his mind on it. According to Jason performer Ted White, Corey Feldman maintained a bratty attitude on set, and I think I already talked about that. Oh yeah, Feldman maintains that his bratty attitude was due to poor treatment by Zito, and that during this filming of Jason's death scene, he was pretending that the sandbags he struck were Zito. You can see a little bit of that in his face. Apparently, the "He's Killing Me" death scene of Rob Zito based on a newspaper article he read about a murder victim in New York City who begged his attacker to stop stabbing him. Zito had intended the sequence to be particularly gut-wrenching, as Rob had been established as a capable opponent for Jason. Upon viewing the screenings of the film, however, Zito realized that the way in which the scene was filmed made Rob seem pathetic and impotent rather than making Jason appear merciless, and often caused audiences to burst out laughing. That's true. I guess it's probably the way it was done. If he had probably gotten a few blows in on Jason and then Jason knocked him down and then started killing him, then probably. Corey Feldman wore a skull cap to create the illusion that he had shaved his head. Yeah, we can't shave his head. No. In an earlier draft of the script, Jimmy was killed with the corkscrew, probably right to the eye. This is the first film in the series to have two surviving protagonists. Anyway, that's about it. I have to say my rating for Friday the 13th Part 4 is a 4 out of 5 stars. If you have not seen the film and you are a fan of the first couple films or just looking for a film to start with, probably this one, though. If you haven't started any of the films, I would suggest watching them in order, but that's just me.